Hi, I'm Anne-Marie with Speak Confident English, and this is your Confident English Wednesday lesson where you want to be every Wednesday if your goal is to advance your English language skills, improve your fluency, and most importantly, your confidence. So I want to start with a question for you this week. Have you ever heard the expression a deer in headlights, to be a deer in headlights? We use this idiomatic expression to talk about that feeling that we have of anxiety, where we have so much anxiety or nervousness that our eyes get big, we can't move, we can't think, we can't speak. And I'm curious if you've ever had that happen to you when someone is talking to you in English or if they've asked you a question. I know that this has happened to me before, and sometimes if someone asks a question and we don't understand it and we just freeze, we have a moment when we are a deer in headlights. So if that has happened to you, I want to help you learn what to do next, because sometimes if we are a deer in headlights, the conversation stops. It becomes unsuccessful communication because we're too nervous, we're too scared to answer. So when that happens to you, I want you to know exactly how to overcome it, to keep the conversation moving forward so that you can also grow in confidence in those situations. So a native speaker, when that happens to us, we simply ask a question that gets clarification or helps us understand the question. I want you to know those same questions so that you can use them. So in this video lesson today, I'm going to teach you some of those questions that you can use, and I'm going to give you some pronunciation tips so that you sound more natural when you ask these questions in English. The expressions that you're going to learn today, or the questions that you're going to learn, are going to help you in professional, polite situations. So these are perfect for business meetings, when you're networking with colleagues or getting to know a new client. But these are also perfect when you want to simply be polite, when you're talking to a new neighbor or someone that you're wanting to become friends with, but you don't know them very well. And I will also include some informal expressions or questions you can use with friends, colleagues that you know very well, and family members as well. Now, before I give you a couple of examples, you might notice that in some of these questions I'm using modals like could and would. If you recall from a few weeks ago, I had a lesson on how to be more kind and polite in English, and I told you that modals are your friend. They are always great for making questions and statements more polite. So here are a couple of examples. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Or, would you mind repeating that more slowly? Would you mind repeating that more slowly? And then one last example for this video lesson is, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So one thing to notice in that last example is my intonation went up at the end to show that it's a question. If I just said, I'm sorry, and my intonation goes down, I'm apologizing for something, and I'm simply stating the fact that I'm apologizing. But if it goes up, I'm sorry, sorry, then it is a question, and it's asking someone to repeat it or to say, I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you repeat it, please? Now let's say that you understand most of the conversation, but maybe there's one specific word or an expression that you really don't understand and it's driving you crazy. You're super frustrated. So you could simply ask or say, I'm sorry, I don't think I understand what you mean by, and then the word or the expression. For example, I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by a deer in headlights. Could you explain that to me? Or, I'm sorry, I don't know what you mean by a deer in headlights. And those questions simply let the other person know that you need them to explain it or use a synonym to clarify their meaning. Now let's look at just a couple of informal questions that you can use, which are best used with friends or colleagues that you're very close to, even family members that you might have who are native English speakers. So I'm going to ask a question. I want you to see if you can identify the words that I'm using. What'd you say? What'd you say? Can you tell which words I'm using? If you're not sure, I'm using the words, what did you say? But when we ask that question in English, we don't pronounce each word clearly like, what did you say? We combine the sounds into what'd you say? What'd you say? Or another example would be, excuse me? Excuse me? Can you tell which words I'm using? I'm using the words excuse me, but again, we reduce some of the sounds and we simply say, excuse me? Excuse me? This is similar to saying, I'm sorry, but it's a little bit more informal and best used with friends or close colleagues. And finally, you might hear native speakers sometimes make the sound This is a sound that we make to show that we weren't focusing or paying attention to you. We didn't hear or understand what you said. If you imagine that you're reading a newspaper at breakfast or reading something online, checking Facebook, and someone says something to you, but you didn't really hear what they said or it wasn't clear to you, you might say, And that sound simply lets the speaker know that you weren't paying attention. You didn't catch what they've said or you didn't understand it clearly, so they need to repeat it. And now you have several examples of questions that native speakers use when something is confusing, it's unclear, we didn't understand, we need someone to repeat something. So you can use these same questions. The next time you have that moment where you're feeling like a deer in headlights, when someone asks you a question and you want to panic or freeze, use one of these questions to get clarification or to have someone repeat it or explain it so that you can answer and keep the conversation going. It is always okay to ask for clarification. Native speakers do it all the time, and so can you. Thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to go to the online lesson for more examples of questions that you can use so that you can be more successful in those conversations and avoid that feeling of anxiety and panic when someone asks you a question in English. Have a fantastic Wednesday, and I'll see you next week.